Hey, deserving listeners, it's just me today. I'm going to talk about the movie Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, because I want to. It is a great movie, and it deserves some comment. And we're heading into Oscar season, so I plan on talking about a lot of Oscar movies, because some of you enjoy it, and I always enjoy it. So let's get into it. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a professor. Rotten Tomatoes, 94%. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is an extremely high rating for a movie that could have easily been taken wrong, or there's a lot in this movie that could be criticized, that it takes a lot of risks. Let's just put it that way. This movie takes a lot of risks. By the way, I'm gonna not spoil it, because I want you to see it. I'm guessing not a lot of people are going to see it, and there are a number of plot twists that, if I mention them, will I guess ruin the movie. And I really want people to see this movie. It's not only a funny, entertaining, interesting, moving movie, but it also, I think, is kind of important to our times in a number of ways, which I'll get into. You know, like the movie Manchester by the Sea. That movie, if taken in as a study of what real grief can look like, I think it's an important movie to see. You know, when you see Star Wars, these are amazing movies, which I will love and cherish for all my days, but I don't consider them to be important social commentary. Aside, I guess the new movies, you could say, there are non-traditional, non-white male heroes, which is cool. But Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri has some extremely relevant themes, which I'll get into. Anyway, I gave it an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 is a very high rating for me. I reserve 9 and ratings of 9 and ratings of 10 for extremely rare situations. So 8 out of 10 means I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of Oscar buzz for this picture, for Best Picture, for Best Screenplay, for Lead Actress, and for Frances McDormand, and for Best Supporting Actor, Sam Rockwell. I predict that it will win. I mean, who knows? Because I haven't seen most of the Oscar movies haven't come out yet, which is annoying to me. I just have to say, why do all the Oscar movies have to come out in December? I realize why. It's because everyone's like, oh, it has to. You want the buzz to carry you into the Oscar season. It's annoying. So it's like suddenly it's like there's no good movies to see for the most part from January through November, and then suddenly in December there's like 30 movies that are amazing, and I have to watch all of them. It's just a weird system. Anyway, I predict, based on current situations, that Three Billboards will be in the running for the screenplay, very much in the running for lead actress. Frances McDormand carries this film, and it's a very complicated character, hard to act. She is very believable, and people really love Frances McDormand, so I'm guessing she's going to win. Sam Rockwell, I don't think he's ever won an Oscar, and he deserves to. And Best Supporting, I think, would be a good place for him to get an Oscar. Anyway, it's considered a black comedy, or a dark comedy, which I would agree with. So let me talk about the good things, then I'll get into the bad things. So the good things is that, in terms of the relevance to our current situation in our society, and by current, I mean the past 100 years, because people seem to think like race relations and police brutality is a new topic, but it's not new. The issues of race and police brutality and respecting the flag have, if you're old enough, you know that there's been like ups and downs of this for a long time. And we're definitely seeing it manifest in kind of a unique way right now because of the internet and because of Trump and everything. But really, it's been an ongoing struggle for a long time. Anyway, so this movie deals with issues of black-white relations. It deals with issues of police versus, black people and minorities and just the public in general. It deals with Missouri being in the South. It deals with small town thinking. It deals with terminal illness. It deals with grief. It deals with family dynamics and family conflict. It deals with domestic violence. And through all this, it's done with comedy. It's definitely a comedy, even though it deals with all these really horrible things. And there are some tough moments, not horrible moments, but you know how Manchester by the Sea, if you saw that, it had some comedic moments, but it was very heavy. Three Billboards is not heavy almost ever. And there are also moments where it's actually kind of like an action movie. There's some mild action in the movie that it's sort of suspenseful or intensely thrilling. I don't know the word. The writing is excellent. The story is just amazing. I'm going to get into the director and everything, but Martin McDonagh has written and directed and been involved with some of my favorite movies of all time: In Bruges, The Guard, and Seven Psychopaths. He's only made a small set of movies or been involved with a small set of movies, and all of them I've either rated a 9 or a 10. So Three Billboards of the movies he's been involved with is my least favorite, and I give it an 8 out of 10. So he's a very consistent artist for me anyway. The story is excellent. It kept my interest. It went in a lot of directions I didn't see coming, but believable directions. I mean, you could argue some of the directions were like, I don't know if that seems realistic, but honestly, to me, it did. I said I'm not going to spoil it because I don't want to spoil it. There are some interesting plot developments where you're like, I didn't see that one coming, but it all makes sense. And I really liked that about the story. The characters are so interesting, especially the main, 5 characters at the top are just so well developed, so realistic, so interesting, so compelling, and you really feel for them. Also, the way that the guy wrote it, everyone is in the gray zone. The lead is, the hero isn't all good. She's not all good. The villain isn't all bad. In fact, by the end, you don't really know who the villain is. There's one guy who you could arguably say is absolutely the villain, but he's a very ancillary character. All the main characters, by the end of the movie, you're like, so who's the bad guy now? And I really like it when writers write characters that are in the gray zone, because everyone is in the gray zone. The best person on the planet has done some pretty bad things, and the worst person on the planet has done some good things. So anyway, also the story is written in a way that doesn't have a Hollywood ending. There are some Hollywood-ish ending bits, but for the most part, it's very not Hollywood the way it ends. There are some story arcs that, in a very realistic way, just do not get resolved. There are story arcs where you're just like, well, I guess we'll never know that question. We'll never know the answer to that question, because for a lot of people, that's just the way it is. Also, along the same lines, there's no real clear moral message. If you analyze this in art class or in philosophy class, there would be a lot of debate as to what the movie is saying or what about life this is illuminating or something. Because in some ways, it's like anger and revenge are bad things. That's one moral you could take away from it. But you could also take the reverse, that anger and revenge are good things, that you should actually take action, because there are times when anger and aggression is called for. Also, there are issues as to racism and violence against racism. When is it okay to be aggressive against racism and against bullies? When is it okay? Also, another sort of side note, any of you fans who watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you'll all know who Mac's mom is played by, the actress. She's the one who's always smoking and grunting. Well, she's in this movie and she plays almost the exact same character. So kind of gives you an idea of like the tone of this movie. I read one review online from just not a journalist, but just someone that on the internet reviewing, and it was like 2 sentences. It said something like, "Too much smoking in this movie. Stop it, Hollywood," or something. I just thought it's funny. It's like, people smoke, there's still there's millions of Americans who smoke a lot. So I don't know what your problem is. As I said earlier, it's legitimately funny. There were moments where I was cracking up. I was like, laughing out loud, couldn't stop laughing for 10 seconds. Having said that, I will tell you that I heard very few other people laughing, and there were, a fair amount of people in the theater with me. So I don't know what that's about. There were definitely some moments where I was like, that's hilarious, and was uncontrollably laughing. Also, the main character played by Frances McDormand, her character is so well written. It is so well written, so well directed, so well acted. It's like it's like The Dude, there's these perfect characters that are just perfectly created. I predict that this character will live on forever. They'll be like, oh, like Frances McDormand's character in Three Billboards. That character was amazing. She cares a lot, you can tell, but she's also super tough. And she does not play games with bullies. And she really stands up to bullies and she knows how to do it. But at the same time, you can tell she's terrified. She's scared. She also responds to her ex-husband in this way that you don't expect, because the movie starts off with she's super tough and she always knows what to say and she doesn't take any shit and she always knows how to sort of handle the situation. But then her ex-husband enters the picture, who is arguably an evil, domestically violent, horrible person. And her tone kind of changes because you can tell that she still has romantic feelings for him. And I just thought that whole thing was just so well designed. She's a true hero for our times, I think. Another good thing about this movie is that there are no artsy bells and whistles. I mean, I like artsy stuff, like the new Blade Runner 2049 has a lot of artsy scenes, a lot of like weird cinematography and weird sets and stuff. And I dig that kind of stuff for sure. But this movie, given its subject matter, given its setting, and given the director's style, it just doesn't have any of that stuff. It's just a straightforward story with a straightforward cinematography scheme, straightforward dialogue. It was really refreshing to see that, there were no scenes where I was like, oh, this is the director's moment to shine, to really show his ability to construct a frame. There were a couple scenes where I guess maybe, now that I think about it, could be considered that, but it wasn't obvious. Let's just put it that way. There's also criticism from people saying that it's a ripoff of a Coen Brothers movie, like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and Big Lebowski, that kind of stuff. But it is so much more than that. And honestly, it's much more entertaining than the average Coen movie. As a Coen fan myself, and I think I've seen every Coen movie, at least, 96% of Coen movies. There's probably maybe one that I haven't seen, I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm a huge Coen Brothers fan. And there are some Coen Brothers movies where I have to sort of power through them, where about midway through, I'm like, okay, where is this going? And the setting, the Coen Brothers are really great with setting up a story, creating characters. But there's a certain point in some Coen Brothers movies where it's like, okay, so now what? Let's get on with it. Like Inside Llewyn Davis had that quality to me. It's like there were parts where I was like, oh man, this is really great. And then somewhere toward the middle or 2/3 of the way through, I'm just like, okay, I'm bored now. Like, where's the story? And I think we're too in love with the characters and not enough in love with entertaining the crowd. Well, this movie, Three Billboards, doesn't do any of that. It's entertaining. There's story that, keeps you watching, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen to that person? And wait, what's going to happen there? And who's going, so, and it doesn't have a feel as a Coen Brothers movie. So I don't understand why anyone would call it that. And even if it was a ripoff of a Coen Brothers movie, it's like, so what? People rip off people all the time. Quentin Tarantino rips off Scorsese all the time, and he also rips off kung fu movies all the time, and B movies. As I was like, who cares? Just as long as it's not like blatant plagiarism or something, it's like, it's fine to riff off other people. So yeah. Now, what are the bad things about this movie? Well, there's very few bad things, so this is really splitting hairs. But there were a couple scenes that I didn't like. There's this one scene between Woody Harrelson's character and his wife, played by Abby Cornish, and they're having this nice moment. They're talking and stuff, and she's very crass in the scene. She's this cute young wife, and out of her mouth comes these very, very crude things, and it's supposed to be this endearing moment, and I found it to be just kind of jarring in some ways and over the top. And I like It's Always Sunny, so I like crude humor for sure, but it just felt disjointed. And I've seen this in a number of movies where a male writer will be writing a scene in which you have a man and a woman trying to be intimate. There's always that scene in a movie where you try to establish early on in the movie, like, these two people are in love. It's like you have a man and woman, you need to very quickly establish that these two people are in love and they have sex a lot. There's always this scene where that happens, and there's been this recent trend among writers where they'll write the woman character as this extremely crude person. Essentially, it's like, I don't know exactly what's going through the writer's head, but I think what it is, it's like, for you guys in the audience, look how cool she is. She's not your typical prude who doesn't like to swear or talk about penises or something. This woman, she's super cool, and she can talk like a guy, and it's like, and in my real life, I'm totally cool with that. But I just feel like these writers are, I don't know, I just feel like they're just taking it too far. And to me, it's almost become like a mini cliche as of late. And I find, and to me, I'd much rather see just, you don't have to make it over the top. Just make two people connecting. What's wrong with two people connecting, and why do there have to be so much of that stuff? Anyway, if you see the movie, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. There's also a dentist scene that I thought just felt unrealistic and kind of strange. And I wish they would have reworked that a little bit. And plus it didn't really the plot really didn't depend on that. But anyway, also the ex-husband, Frances McDormand's character, her ex-husband has a very young wife now. She's like 20 years old, 19 years old. And I felt like that character was a little cartoonish and maybe a little even ageist in some way. It just felt a little mean at times. And so yeah. Also, the movie was a little too long. I think it could have been trimmed down. It was it felt like it was 2 hours long, but it felt like a long 2 hours at times toward the end. Whatever happened to that magic 90-minute, guideline. Also, there was some violence in the movie that was a little too much. Again, I like violent movies. It's fine. That doesn't scare me, but it just felt like, okay, I get it. There's bad things happening. Let's take it to I just feel like there's certain scenes now where they're like, let's drag out this violence a little bit. I just didn't think that was always necessary. Also, Woody Harrelson's character is Woody Harrelson himself is 21 years older than the woman who's playing his wife. And it's very clear. I mean, Woody Harrelson doesn't look like a young man in this movie, but the woman who's playing his wife looks very young. I mean, and as I've made episodes about age difference in relationships, we all know that age difference is fine, and our notions about it being a bad thing are completely cultural and not based on any kind of empirical science. So if people want to have a 20-year-old age difference in their marriage, that is 100% fine, and there is nothing wrong with that, and we should stop looking down on people like that. On the other hand, in movies, there's this tendency whenever you have a lead or a big actor like Woody Harrelson, they will often pair them up with a wife who is very much younger than they are. And I find that to be, it's fine if you do it every now and then, but if you do it all the time, and because Woody Harrelson himself, he's probably, 50 something, 50 to 55. And so realistically, what you would do is you would find a woman who was, at least 45, if not 55 or 60 herself. And there's this thing in Hollywood, like you can't have a 55-year-old woman in a movie unless it's like Frances McDormand, who is like this tough mom, So if you want to have this sympathetic wife to Woody Harrelson, you've got to cast like a young, beautiful girl. And I just found that, I don't know. Again, if it was the first 3 or 4 times, it's like, okay, whatever. But it just happens so often. There's certain men, like you have Robert De Niro in a movie, and he has a wife, and his wife is the character or the actress who is playing his wife is like 30 years younger than him, and it's just like, there's something weird about that. I just have to say that, again, there's nothing wrong with age differences in relationships at all. If you're a 30-year-old woman and you're married to a 55-year-old man, 25 years older than you, there's nothing wrong with that. And we need to stop looking at it that way. But at the same time, the constant casting decisions in these movies is just getting a little annoying to me. And when I see realistic aged people together in, they'll actually, when I see movies and they have Woody Harrelson and they a guy like Woody Harrelson, and they cast a woman who looks like she is similar to his age, I really commend them. I'm like, oh, good job. Like this looks real to me. This looks typical to me. Because although age difference in relationships are empirically fine, and the only reason why we condemn them is because of our weird cultural notions, the fact is that the vast majority of people marry people who are very close in age to them, meaning within 3 to 5 years. So that, I don't know. Anyway. Also, the trailers make it look like it's a romp, like it's, this funny, take no shit woman who like talks a lot of shit to people. And it's like, yeah, that's part of it, but really it's so much more than that. It's hard to make a trailer for a movie like this because it doesn't really have an analogous movie that you could compare it to, and you don't want to spoil some of the important story twists that it has. Anyway, So again, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I might even bump it up to a 9 out of 10 in the future. I'm not sure. The writing is awesome. I would be very happy if the director won for best screenplay and for Frances McDormand winning for lead actress. I think those are very, so the negatives are very, I'm just splitting hairs. Okay, so let's get into the psychology of it for a second. But first, let's take a break. All right, we're back from the break. If you haven't become a patron of the podcast, do so now. Go to patreon.com. Also, spread the word about the podcast. Post our episodes on your places, your Facebooks and your Twitters and stuff. That's always a great thing that you can do to spread the word. Okay, so let's get into the psychology. There's a lot of grief in this story, and the main plot involving Frances McDormand, you could say, is primarily based on grief and guilt about loss. She, in a very economic way, they tell the story that basically shows you that she's dealing with some demons about her own behavior, and she is. So in the previews, that Frances McDormand's character, her daughter died, and was raped and killed, about mid, but you don't really. So for the first half of the movie, all you kind of know is like she really wants to find the criminal who did this to her daughter, and she wants the police department to find these people, and she believes the police department aren't doing enough. But about midway through the movie, you discover some things where you're just like, oh, is this really about her finding the killers, or is this about her own guilt for feeling as though she's responsible for her daughter's death? And they very quickly sort of tell us bits and stories about why that is. And so Frances McDormand's character is, she's dealing with a lot of pain. She's dealing with a lot of guilt. She's dealing with a lot of grief. She misses her daughter. She feels responsible, probably. She feels like she has to take matters into her own hands. She's angry. She's sad. There's just a lot of that in the movie that I think they portrayed really well. Also, the villain in the movie, there's a pivotal moment in his story. So this is the Sam Rockwell character. So Sam Rockwell usually plays these nice guys, but in this movie he plays a racist, really on some levels just a terrible person. And it's sort of a comedic terrible person, if that makes any sense, but there's a point in the movie toward the end where he reads a letter from his mentor. And in this letter, his mentor basically says, I believe in you. And even though I know you don't think I believe in you, I really believe in you. And I see good in you, and I know you can do good. And at this point was a pivotal moment for the Sam Rockwell character. And, I won't go into the details, but basically the psychology about this in general that I can talk about is that when people exhibit bad behavior, that we might call it, antisocial behavior, bullying behavior, racist behavior, when that person has a mentor that believes in them and loves them and guides them, then in my experience, and research shows this too, the individual is much more likely to head in a more functional direction. There's something about having a mentor believe in you. There's something about having a mentor love you unconditionally and just be like, you know what? I get it. I'm with you. And I believe you can do it. I believe you're a good person. It's sort of like when Luke is talking to Darth Vader and I sense good in you. It's a similar kind of thing. It's like sometimes that's all someone needs is someone just to say, you know what? I know you can do it and I see it in you. And as someone who is sometimes in a mentor role to people, I will recognize that power and put it to use. I'll notice supervisees or students will be struggling with their confidence in something, and I will call upon that voice inside of me and tell them what's inside of me, which is like, I believe in you. I know you're going to do great. And here's what I see in you. Here are the strengths I see in you. And people thrive under that kind of stuff. And so if you're struggling with self-esteem, get a mentor. Cultivate a relationship with a helpful mentor. If you're in a position where you can mentor other people, use that because it's so powerful to people. There's also in this movie regarding psychology, another thing you could say is that there's an interesting depiction of domestic violence that again, very quick, and very economic, but an interesting kind of mini study on, violence in families. Okay. So I want to conclude here by just going over the different figures, the writer, director, and the actors. It was written and directed by Martin McDonagh, who is a British-Irish guy. He's actually a very accomplished playwright, and he has 4 Tony nominations. So he's a very accomplished playwright and a very accomplished movie director and writer. In 2008, he wrote and directed In Bruges, which has Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson in it. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in my top 100. I gave it a 10 out of 10. In Bruges it's just a wonderful, funny, interesting, violent movie. In 2011, he produced a movie called The Guard, which stars Brendan Gleeson and Don Cheadle. And I gave this movie a 9 out of 10, and it was written and directed by his brother, John Michael McDonagh, but he produced The Guard, so he was involved in it quite a bit. And then 2012, he wrote and directed Seven Psychopaths, which starred Colin Farrell, Woody Harrelson, Sam Rockwell, and Christopher Walken. I gave that one a 9 out of 10. I need to rewatch that movie because I forget why I liked Seven Psychopaths so much, and for that matter, The Guard. I need to watch The Guard and Seven Psychopaths. If I described those 2 movies to you, or really even all 3, In Bruges as well, it's like you'd be like, huh, why is that so great? Well, there's just something about the way that Martin McDonagh writes and directs, and the way the characters are just so well realized that I don't know, I just really enjoy it. Okay, who started this movie? Well, again, we mentioned Frances McDormand. You might remember her from Raising Arizona, Mississippi Burning, Miller's Crossing, Darkman, Barton Fink, Shortcuts, The Hudsucker Proxy. Fargo is probably her biggest movie. She's the lead in Fargo. She's Marge Gunderson. She was in Almost Famous, Aeon Flux, Burn After Reading. Apparently the Coen brothers really like her. She was in one of the Transformers movies. She was in Moonrise Kingdom, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. She was one of the voices in The Good Dinosaur, which I think is an underrated Pixar movie. She was in Hail Caesar, and again in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And next year she'll be in Isle of Dogs, which is the new Wes Anderson movie that I'm very much looking forward to. And I'm pretty sure that for next Halloween, I'm going to go as the Japanese kid. Frances McDormand has achieved the Triple Crown of acting because she has won an Academy Award for Fargo. She won a Tony Award for a Broadway play called Good People in 2011, and she's won an Emmy Award for the HBO miniseries Olive Kitteridge, which came out in 2014. So you've all heard of the EGOT, right? So this is the GOT, right? No, this is the EOT because she hasn't earned a Grammy. So she has an Oscar, a Tony, and an Emmy. So the Triple Crown of acting. And she has been married to Joe Coen, one of the Coen brothers, since 1984. All right, Woody Harrelson. The first movie that I really remember him from, of course, he was on Cheers for so long, but the first movie I remember him from was White Man Can't Jump, which is one of Umberto's favorite movies. Indecent Proposal, Natural Born Killers, The People versus Larry Flint, Kingpin, great movie. The Thin Red Line, great movie. A Prairie Home Companion, No Country for Old Men, Battle in Seattle, Semi-Pro, Trans-Siberian, that was a great movie, Trans-Siberian. Zombieland, The Hunger Games, Seven Psychopaths, Out of the Furnace, great movie. 999, another great movie. War of the Planet of the Apes, another great movie. And LBJ is coming out later in December, and he plays Johnson, so that'll be interesting. Sam Rockwell is also in this movie. He's one of my favorite actors. I've been following him since his early days in the 90s. He was one of those actors who in the 90s I was like, I really like I don't care about the story. I don't care about the directing. I just want to watch this guy do stuff. There's just something about Sam Rockwell, the way he does stuff. It's just like, I just want to watch this guy do things. The first movie I remember seeing him in was 96 Box of Moonlight. He was in Lawn Dogs, Jerry and Tom. I remember liking that. He was in The Green Mile. I think he plays like a bad person in that movie. But his big breakout role was in Galaxy Quest, in which he plays Guy. Galaxy Quest is one of my favorite movies. Charlie's Angels, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. He plays the lead in that. Matchstick Men, Piccadilly Jim, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He plays Zaphod Beeblebrox. The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. He was in Choke, which is kind of the follow-up to Fight Club. He was in Frost Nixon. He was in Moon, which is amazing. Cowboys and Aliens, Seven Psychopaths, The Way, Way Back, which is a great movie. Mr. Right, which I don't remember if I liked it, or I think I did not like that movie, Mr. Right. I remember it ending kind of weird. Also in this movie is Peter Dinklage, whom you all know from Game of Thrones. He plays Tyrion. But I've been following his work as well ever since he was in Living in Oblivion in 1995. Human Nature, a Michel Gondry movie. Station Agent was the movie I remember really noticing him, because he plays a lead in Station Agent and just being like, whoa, this guy is really good. He's in Elf. He kind of has a cameo in Elf. He's in The Baxter. He was in Prince Caspian, the Narnia movie. He's been in an X-Men movie and Three Billboards. And he's been in some other movies. I'm only reading just some of the movies that these people have been in. So again, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Highly recommend it if you're into that sort of thing. Get ready for a 2-hour movie though. And I'm guessing it's going to be up for Oscars. So see it now, because it probably won't be in streaming by the time the Oscars come out, or maybe it will. I don't know. Anyway, I recommend it. It's fun. It's moving, it's interesting, it's thought-provoking, and it's just an acting, writing tour de force. Every time I say or hear tour de force, I think, what is the origin of that tour de force? It's like, huh? And I could look it up on the internet right now, but some things are just worth remaining a mystery. There's a certain thing you always want, a certain mystery in life, and I'm going to let that one stay a mystery to me, because you don't need to know everything in life. Let's just leave tour de force. It's probably a French thing, I don't know. Tour de force, let's just leave it as a mystery, because that's one of the fun things about life. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining me out there. Please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really do.